In Aurora, Colorado, entire apartment complexes are being taken over by armed Venezuela gangs with weapons, the likes of which even the military doesn't see.
They are known for their cruelty, feared for their violence, and have left a trail of terror wherever they go. This is the legacy of Venezuela's Tren de Aragua. Born from the chaos of a crumbling prison system, the gang has transformed into a deadly force that thrives on extortion, trafficking, and ruthless brutality. Their methods are savage, their enemies are crushed without mercy, and innocent lives are collateral damage in their battle of power. With a reputation for cruelty that surpasses the most infamous criminal organizations, Tren de Aragua stands as a chilling symbol of how far unchecked violence can spread. The beginnings and evolution of Tren de Aragua, TDA, began as a prison gang in Venezuela's Tocoron prison. But it grew rapidly into one of the country's most dangerous criminal organizations. Initially focused on controlling drugs and extortion within the prison system, the gang capitalized on Venezuela's political chaos to expand its reach. By the mid-2010s, TDA was no longer confined to the prison walls. It extended its influence throughout Venezuela. The name Tren de Aragua comes from the Aragua state, where the gang originated. It has been known to recruit both inmates and individuals outside the prison system, gaining control over many criminal markets, including drug trafficking and human smuggling. The prison system's corruption and the state's collapse helped the gang grow, turning it into a well-organized crime network with a reputation for extreme violence and ruthless enforcement of its rules. This early evolution from a localized prison gang to a national threat laid the foundation for its later worldwide expansion. Expansion across Latin America and beyond, TDA's rise beyond Venezuela highlights its intention to become a global crime powerhouse. Initially, it expanded into neighboring countries like Colombia, Peru, and Chile. By exploiting the Venezuelan migration crisis, TDA entered these nations, establishing operations in migrant hubs and border regions. In Colombia, for example, the gang is deeply involved in human trafficking and drug smuggling, often clashing with other criminal groups to control territories. Similarly, in Chile, TDA has engaged in violent extortion schemes targeting vulnerable migrants. Its operations in Latin America set the stage for its eventual entry into the United States. There, the gang has taken advantage of the vulnerable US-Mexico border to get into cities such as Miami, New York, and El Paso, proving its ability to adapt its methods to different environments. What began as a prison gang in Venezuela is now a global franchise, capable at adjusting its operations to the laws, cultures, and vulnerabilities of each new country it enters. Brutality and violent tactics. The gang's reputation for brutality is central to its power. In Venezuela, TDA routinely uses murder, torture, and kidnapping to maintain control over its territories and rivals. Violence is not just a tool of enforcement, it is a means of establishing dominance. In Peru and Colombia, the gang has been linked to brutal killings of migrants and human trafficking victims who refuse to cooperate. In the US, the violence is more strategic, but not any less serious. Cases like the murder of nursing student Larkin Riley in Georgia demonstrate the gang's capacity for violence on American soil. Gang members have also been involved in high-profile robberies, kidnappings, and even executions. Unlike many other criminal groups, TDA shows little hesitation in targeting civilians or bystanders, making it one of the most feared organizations in Latin America and beyond. Exploitation of migrants. A predatory operation. TDA's exploitation of migrants is one of the most evil components of its operations. As millions of Venezuelans fled economic collapse, TDA positioned itself as both a smuggler and predator. The gang offers transportation across borders only to extort migrants later, demanding excessive fees or forcing them into labor or prostitution. In US cities like El Paso and New York, migrants in shelters are forced into paying for protection or smuggling services. TDA has also been implicated in trafficking women and children into sex work, capitalizing on the desperation of those seeking safety. By preying on the most vulnerable, TDA turns a humanitarian crisis into a profitable criminal enterprise. Influence in the United States. Although Tren de Aragua, TDA started in Venezuela, its influence in the US has expanded quickly and dangerously. The gang's presence is now felt in cities like El Paso, Dallas, Miami, and New York, where it engages in a range of crimes from human trafficking to drug distribution. In El Paso, members reportedly turned a migrant shelter into a hub for trafficking drugs and people. In New York, the gang operates differently, focusing on the sale of counterfeit drugs, particularly along Roosevelt Avenue, a busy commercial area. Their strategy in the US contrasts with their overt violence in Latin America. Here they prioritize high-reward crimes like retail theft and extortion, which are harder to track and disrupt. Despite these tactical differences, TDA remains a major threat. US gangs, particularly those with established dominance, view the gang's growth as an act of aggression. As TDA carves out its territory, conflicts with rival gangs could erupt, leading to bloody turf wars. Such violence would not only impact gang members, but could also harm innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. The lack of intelligence sharing between Venezuela and US law enforcement worsens the situation, allowing TDA to exploit loopholes in immigration and law enforcement, further establishing itself in American communities and increasing the potential for violence. Challenges for law enforcement. Law enforcement faces complex challenges in tearing down TDA due to the gang's decentralized, transnational structure. Unlike traditional gangs with centralized leadership, TDA operates more like a franchise, with independent cells in multiple countries, making it harder to trace and dismantle its entire network. In the US, authorities struggle to differentiate between legitimate migrants and TDA members because the gang frequently uses forged documents and aliases. This problem is strengthened by the lack of diplomatic relations between the US and Venezuela, which prevents access to vital criminal records. Consequently, US agencies like the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, DHS, are often left in the dark about the criminal histories of individuals entering the country. Furthermore, the gang's use of encrypted messaging apps and other discreet communication tools makes it difficult for law enforcement to monitor their activities. Local police in cities like El Paso and Miami have noted that TDA members blend easily into immigrant communities, making it challenging to pinpoint their exact numbers or movements. Despite ongoing efforts, including enhanced surveillance and interagency cooperation, the gang's rapid growth continues to overwhelm law enforcement's capacity to respond. Political implications and immigration policy. The TDA rise has ignited intense political debates, especially in the United States, where it serves as a turning point for discussions on immigration and national security. Critics argue that the gang's increasing presence is a direct consequence of weak border control policies, accusing current immigration strategies of failing to prevent dangerous individuals from entering the country. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's decision to label TDA a foreign terrorist organization exemplifies the political urgency surrounding the issue. This characterization intensifies penalties for gang-related crimes and allows law enforcement to take more aggressive action against suspected members. Meanwhile, the Biden administration's humanitarian parole program, which allows certain migrants from countries like Venezuela to enter the US legally, has faced sharp criticism. Some claim this policy unknowingly creates loopholes that gang members exploit. The debate over TDA has highlighted a broader ideological divide. One side demands stricter border enforcement, while the other calls for a more humane approach that distinguishes between migrants seeking refuge and those involved in criminal activity. These tensions have turned TDA into a political weapon, with parties using the gang's presence to strengthen their views on immigration reform. The conflict underscores the challenge of balancing border security with compassion as politicians grapple with how best to protect the public while upholding humanitarian values. Impact on communities and humanitarian crisis. The impact of TDA's activities extends far beyond its immediate casualties, casting a shadow over entire communities. In cities like Aurora, Colorado, and Miami, residents live in fear of the gang's violence and criminal enterprises. Migrants who should find refuge often find themselves targeted by TDA, adding to their trauma and suffering. The gang's presence worsens the humanitarian crisis, creating a cycle of exploitation and fear. For local communities, the gang's operations bring increased crime, instability, and a common sense of insecurity. TDA's influence erodes public trust in law enforcement and government institutions, further compounding the challenges faced by affected communities. Tren de Aragua is a brutal and deadly multinational gang whose rise reflects the connection of crime, migration, and global instability. From its origins in Venezuela's crumbling prison system to its expansion across the Americas, TDA's growth is a testament to its ruthless efficiency and adaptability. It exploits vulnerable populations, evades law enforcement, and fuels political debates, making it one of the most pressing security threats today. Addressing the gang's influence requires a sophisticated approach that combines law enforcement action with humanitarian efforts to protect those most at risk.